Alright guys, so I'm going to give you some Nmap tips. Of course, these are my Nmap tips, but the main goal is to give you some evasion techniques, detecting firewalls, and kind of how to identify that sort of thing. That's the main goal of the video. Now, I'm just going off my own experience and my own knowledge. I'm sure there's many people out there that will have better commands and Nmap ninja skills than I will, but I'm going to share with you what I think is important. Now, I do a 2-hour Nmap class, which I'm not going to do a whole 2 hours. This video might be ended, maybe 15 minutes or so, something like that. But I'm not going to go into the full 2 hours. That's a whole separate class. But I'm definitely going to give you some extra little techniques here. Now, what I've got is I've got Wireshark up and running. I've got it already sniffing on ETH0. So if you need to, just open up your terminal, type in Wireshark. Wireshark will start up. And then select your interface and go ahead and start that up and start the sniffing. I have two other hosts on the same network. I have a Windows 8 machine and I have Windows XP. You don't need to have the Windows 8. Windows XP is eventually going to be our target, but I wanted to throw another machine on the network just for some of the demonstration that we're going to be doing. And there's some do's and don'ts. If you want to be less noticeable, what you don't want to do is a TCP connect scan. This is going to establish a full TCP session or connect session, and then eventually it's going to close it out. Now, that being said, this is a TCP SYN scan. The difference is not that much. There's more traffic that's generated with the TCP connect scan than there is the TCP SYN scan, and that's why they consider the SYN scan more stealthy. It's stealthy, but not really. It's stealthy compared to the full TCP connect, but it's still not very stealthy. So let's use this as an example. Let's say that we send a SYN packet to a port that is closed. What happens is that the other machine is going to send us a reset packet. And then that's the end of it. And that's how we know if the port is open or if it's closed. If we get an acknowledgement back, then we know that the port is open, or at least that it should be. So let's say if you remember this, Nmap will scan a default X amount of ports. Do you know what that number is? It's 1,000. So let's just say that all those 1,000 ports are closed. This means that in Wireshark, if we were watching this, there's going to be 1,000 reset packets, which are actually color-coded red. Funny, but if anybody was watching that, they'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. That doesn't look right. And so the SYN scan technically is more stealthy, but it still will generate a lot of reset packets. And many other scans will do the same thing, but we'll talk about that in a second. So anyways, this is also the default Nmap scan, is the TCP SYN scan. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a capital P and a 0. The capital P and a 0 tells Nmap that it doesn't want to do any kind of pings. We don't want to do an ICMP ping. We don't want to do an ARP ping. We don't want to do any pings at all. So why would we need to specify this? Well, let's say we were doing a range. Like let's say we were doing 192.168.1.0/24. Well, what Nmap is going to do is it's going to ping the subnet, all the different IPs on that subnet, the entire class, and it's going to identify what hosts are alive. So once it identifies what hosts are alive, then it's going to do the port scan or whatever we tell it to do. But obviously, if we tell it not to ping, it's going to try to port scan every single one of these IP addresses, and so that's bad. So we're not going to do a range. We're going to scan the specific target, which is 106. And we already know that it exists by whatever means we found that out. So we're going to use a dash capital P and a 0. We're going to eliminate that. That's one more thing that's generated that goes across the network. So we're going to eliminate that. Next thing we're going to do is a dash lowercase n. This will, well, by default, Nmap, see, all the things that we're just turning things off that Nmap does by default. So the dash lowercase n is a reverse DNS resolution. or lookup. It's more of a resolution, but we're not scanning like Microsoft.com or Google.com or something. So we don't need this. We're scanning an IP address that is on the same network as we are. It's internal. It's not external, going out to who knows where. So we don't need this feature. That's just one less thing that we can stop it from doing. One less thing that it's not going to generate going across the network. So that's all we're trying to do, is minimize the traffic. What else can we do? Oops, let me bring that back. The next thing that I think we should do is a dash lowercase p. We're going to specify the ports that we want. Now remember that 1,000 ports, well, that's going to generate a lot of reset packets, and we don't want that to happen. So if you don't care, then just scan all of them, no problem. But if you are suspicious that someone may be monitoring this, whatever the situation is, if you're doing a pen test against a particular company, a large corporation, or people that have IT departments, network admins that are monitoring the traffic, then obviously you would be concerned. In a residential area against just a regular person, then you probably wouldn't need to worry about this. But let's just say we wanted to scan, let's say port 80. We'll scan port, let's say 21. We'll scan port 139. We'll scan port 445. And if we thought that maybe there was like a web server, obviously we can try and scan different like mail servers, or we can do like 3306, which is MySQL, whatever. We'll just leave those there. We're just going to pick a few. You can pick whatever you'd like, as long as it's within range. As long as the port exists, you don't go to like 70,000 or something. So you can pick your ports. So now instead of scanning 1,000, we're going to be more specific. That's going to generate less traffic. Next thing that we're going to do is, I guess we can do a capital dash capital D. Now, I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we can do some of this evasion type stuff. The capital D is for decoy. And what I do is 192.168, and you can put it all the way across, up against the D. You don't need to put a space there. This is actually fine, 192.168.1.8. That is the IP address of this Windows 8 machine. Now, when I do a decoy, I will do decoys that are on the network. Actual machines that are live on the network. Some people will just pick a bunch of random IP addresses. And that sounds like a good idea, but that can actually cause issues on the network, and we don't want there to be any issues on the network. So basically, what happens is that we're going to use a decoy, and when we look in Wireshark after we do some of this stuff, it's going to actually show that 192.168.1.8 is scanning us as well. But it's going to have other IP addresses, whatever we specify, also sending out information. They're really not. It's just us, making it look like that. But that's an issue. And so when the target machine goes to respond to these IP addresses that don't exist, that can cause issues. And then it's going to sit there and try to retransmit it X amount of times, and then finally it'll stop. But there's just a lot of different things that can happen. So to avoid all that, I will use an IP address that is live on the network. That way, when it does send, like let's say it sends back an ACK, or it sends, if it's a reset, then no big deal. But the host should be reachable, I guess is what I want to say. So that's the idea behind that. So, next thing that we can do is timing. Let's talk about timing real quick. We can go 0 to 5. Now, these are Nmap timing profiles. There are actually like at least seven different things, I think, that we can set the timing on. The delay time, time between each port. Like, so if we're scanning 80, 21, 139, whatever. So how long in between each one of those do we wait, until it sends the next one? Just a ton of stuff. It's crazy. But just to give you an idea, if we do a 0, this is a preset. There's a profile that already sets all these other things that are inside of Nmap for this timing stuff. To get a better description of all that, you want to go to Nmap's website. They have documentation on everything. If you can go through all of the documentation on that Nmap website, you'll be like a Nmap master. But anyhow, the dash 0, to let me give you an idea, a dash capital T 0 is, I believe, 15 minutes. 15 minutes in between ports. So if we did 1,000, like the default, and it was going to scan one port every 15 minutes, you're gonna wait quite a while before that scan completes. So that's just to give you an idea. Now, obviously, if we were only going to do, like, say this, and we had, a couple hours to kill or something, then, or an hour, whatever it is, then, yeah, that might not be bad. But that's going to look way less suspicious. You're going to be pretty much unnoticeable if you do it that way. If you do it 1, I believe it's 5 minutes. So it goes from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. And then just to give you an idea, if you go all the way up to 5, I believe that's 250 milliseconds. Dash 4, I think, is 500 milliseconds. But anyways, I'm just going to leave mine on 2. I think that's a decent. If you were really paranoid, then I would do at least a dash a T1 or a 0, which is going to take longer. But we'll just keep it on 2, which is lower than the default, by the way. What else can we do? We can do a dash capital S. Dash capital S, then we can specify like 192, which you can put a space or we can leave it here, it doesn't matter. 192.168.1.99. The dash capital S is to spoof our IP address so that it looks like it's coming from somewhere else. Now the decoy kind of does that too. But you'll see. I'll show you an example here in a second when we actually look at the Wireshark. Next thing, we can do a dash dash spoof dash. Oops, there we go. Mac. And we can do a dash. We can do a 0. And when we do a 0, it's going to generate a random MAC address. Or we can specify 00 colon 1122 and so forth. You got to have 6 sets of numbers separated by colon. And so that's the proper way that you can do that if you want to specify a MAC. Now, you cannot specify a MAC that is already on the same network. If you specify a MAC address that belongs to another machine, then that's going to cause problems. So you don't want to do that. So what I'll do is I'll do a dash capital S, and I'll just pick an IP 192.168.1. I'll do 222, just like that. Let's see, anything else I can think of? We'll talk about the firewall. So I'm going to go and I'm going to change this send scan to an ACK scan. That's a good idea for detecting firewalls. So let's go ahead and do that, and we will look at. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I forgot. When we do the capital S to spoof our IP, we need to do a dash E and then specify ETH0. Now you may have issues if you go to spoof your IP and your MAC. You may have issues. The scan might not work properly, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But let's go ahead and do this. So you're going to do a dash E. Anytime you use that dash capital S, you've got to use the dash E and then your interface that you're sending out on. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Now we see some interesting things. Filtered, 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 filtered. And we can see that there's 3306, all the stuff that we asked for. Well, are these ports actually open? Are they alive on that other machine? Well, let me give you another example. Let's do like ridiculous numbers, like let's see. Oh, we can't. Well, okay, we'll just do that. Hit enter. Just as long as you don't go over the 65,000, whatever it is. And so now we've got a bunch of other stuff, and it's all filtered. Well, I'm pretty sure that these made-up ports that I just did probably are not actually on that machine. They're not alive, but for whatever reason, it still returns back filtered. So when you see filtered, it's a good... it's kind of an indicator that, well, something is filtering this. I mean, it's self-explanatory. there is a firewall most probably that is filtering these requests. Basically, what happens is that we're not getting responses. In theory, anyways, how this works is, let's say I send you a packet, whatever it is, and if the port is closed, then you send me back a reset. Or if the port is open, you'll acknowledge. You'll send me back a SYN and ACK or whatever it is. But I will eventually get an acknowledgement, and that's all I'm looking for. And so then I know, okay, well, it responded on that port, but it gave me an acknowledgement, so the port's open. If you give me a reset packet, then that's like telling me no, it doesn't exist. Well, in this case, I'm not getting any responses. I'm getting nothing. And that's because no responses were given back to me. The packets were dropped. And so it considers those filtered. But that does not mean that the ports actually are up, or that they're open, or that they're closed. All the ACK does is tell us, is there a firewall that's filtering this port or not? So let's go to our XP machine. And as we can see, it's on, and it also don't allow exceptions. Now let's turn the exceptions on, and this will be back to normal. Our file and print sharing and all that stuff will be there. So let's go back to Kali and let's execute the same exact scan. And we'll see what happens. And now we can see a couple reset packets that we got. I can just see them going there in the background. So we've got 2 unfiltered, and we've got a bunch that are filtered. So this is a good indication that, yes, there's a firewall, but these ports are unfiltered. It's actually letting us pass through to these ports. The firewall is not dropping the packets. We're actually getting a response back for these 2 ports. And so we get this unfiltered status, or this unfiltered state, as it says. So at this point, we could actually try and do our exploit against 445, like our MS08067 that we've used all the time. But now let me show you a different example. If we do a SYN scan, so we verified that there is a firewall. It's filtered. It's filtering ports, and we also got some good news that there's stuff that's unfiltered. So that's good. Now let's see what happens when we do a SYN scan, and this will confirm if these ports are actually, if we're able to get to these ports or not. These 2 ports appear to be open. So the SYN scan will at least confirm if a port is open or if it's closed, or in this case, if it's filtered or open. Because the firewall is on, it technically is filtering everything. It doesn't tell us if it's closed or if it's open. However, there are exceptions. And those exceptions, file and print sharing. So right there, you're going to have 445 and port 139. Or like the remote desktop, for example. So it's allowing exceptions to certain ports. So that's one way that you can verify if there's a firewall and if it's letting things pass through or not. Or let's just say that you're a network admin and you want to see if a firewall is configured properly, but from the outside, from not the same computer that you're on. You want to use another computer. You can use Nmap and you can actually see if anything's getting through that way or not. And we can see that this thing over here is still, see how it's trying to retransmit? And this is what I'm talking about, bogging up the network. Since we're pretty much done, I'm kind of done showing you those scans. I'm going to do, actually, no, that looks good. So I'm going to just leave that there. And let's go ahead and take a look at the Wireshark results now. Now, when I talked about, setting a fake IP or setting an IP that, like for the decoy that doesn't exist, well, this is the kind of things that I don't want to happen. It's trying to retransmit. And it's trying to retransmit because it doesn't exist. It's not getting any kind of response back. So the source 192.168.1.106, that's the XP machine. And it's trying to send to 222, which is my spoofed address. It doesn't exist. it's not getting any responses, and so it's sitting here trying to see how it's creating more traffic. And that's why if you had an IP address that actually is real on the network, then you wouldn't have that issue. So just wanted you to be aware of that. All right, so we also set a decoy. If we look over here, we had our decoy 192.168.1.8, and if we look, we can actually see 192.168.1.8, 192.161, and so forth. Now, that looks all pretty cool. Now, what if we did this? One more thing. I'm going to show you something else to do. We're on a roll. I'm going to go ahead and remove this decoy because we're kind of just going to use our spoofed IP as the decoy. Now watch what I do. I'm going to become the Windows 8 machine, and let's try that. I should have done a -V there for verbose. But anyways, look, it still works. We still get... How does it know? How is this getting back to me? I mean, I know how it works, but I'm trying to get you guys to think. How how is this information getting back to me if I'm not really 192.168, this Windows 8 machine? If it's sending back the responses to this Windows 8 machine, how am I getting this information? How am I able to see what's open and what's filtered? So let's take a look down here, and let's check this out. It's all coming from 192.168.1.8, a whole bunch of this stuff. Now, the only difference is, let me give you an example. Here's where it starts to make sense. Let's look at, there's a bunch of other stuff that's going on here, but let's try and find, here we go. Let's try to find, you can see that the destination of this is all messed up now. We generated a bunch of other packets. It still looks like that 1.8 though, for whatever reason. It's still going through, it's just generating a bunch of other things, and there's a reason for that. But it still worked, and that's the thing. So, let's go up here to an earlier session. Let's just say right around here. Okay. So I'm just going to pick one. And if we look down here at the packet, let's look at the layer 2. We can see the source MAC address 5A:30. The destination 31.2B, which would be the Windows XP machine. But 5A:130. Now that's supposedly the Windows 8 machine. Now let's look at the MAC address of 222. It's still 5A.30. Still 5A.30. So that's what didn't change, was the MAC address. And so if someone was to look at this and really pay attention, if they just looked at this and they weren't really educated with Wireshark or whatever, and they're just wanting to see the IP addresses, well, this would probably fool them. But if you look at it more closely, we'll notice that the source MAC address of both of these IP addresses are the same. Now let's go all the way down. Let's remember that. That was 5A:30. Let's go all the way down to the bottom. See, now it's showing us the broadcast, but this has to do with the IP issue. But let me see if... Alright, well, it doesn't look like I can show you it because we're not getting the same stuff down here. Let me go here. Here we go. 5A:30. Let me stop this. Let me close this out. I'm going to restart it. That way we can get a fresh take on this. I'm going to execute the same exact command. And let's see what kind of traffic it generates. So there's our TCP, which is what I was looking for. It was just we had a lot of traffic and I was seeing the end of it. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so if you remember what that IP, that MAC address was, here it is. 5A30. So even though whether we used a decoy, whether we spoofed our MAC address to match even another IP address on the network, we still have the same MAC address. So just wanting to show you that. What I'm going to go see now, you can see all these retransmissions trying to send to 192.168.1.8. However, it's having an issue probably because of me duplicating the IP address. That's my guess. Could be wrong there, but anyways, I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. Anything else I want to cover? I think that pretty much does it. Just as kind of for fun, it's actually not going to be fun, but let's just do a 0. let's do a stop. I'm going to close this out, and let's do a new start. Now, see how it doesn't generate the traffic? Well, there's one, but this is just DHCP. It's not the TCP traffic that we were generating. This is just other stuff that's going on the network. But you can see that we would have to wait like every 15 seconds, and then we would get one packet or two packets that would come up every 15 minutes. And so there's your perfect example of if you want to be stealthy, use the 0. That's pretty crazy. We can do a Control-C to stop that. We can change the T. Let's say we do a 5, which is ridiculous, insane. I mean, we can just look at all that. It generates a ton of traffic. So anyways, guys, I could keep rambling on, and I could spend hours on this stuff, which I do all the time. But anyhow, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a little bit, identifying firewalls, filtered and unfiltered ports. You can do the SYN scan, even though that it's still not perfect. It's better than a TCP Connect scan. There's some other scans that you would definitely want to stay away from. There's an IP protocol type scan. You don't want to do that. That's going to generate a ton of ICMP requests. There's just some other stuff, but if you stick to kind of the little methods that I was showing you there, the ACK scan, that's a great scan. And another thing about that ACK scan is that one frame is sent and one frame is received. So as far as traffic, it's a lot better than the SYN scan, but it does not identify what's open and what's closed. But anyways, you put it all together. Thank you very much for putting up with me for the length of this video. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys later.